that was a big deal, that race. And, you know, the assassination really put a kibosh on it, of Mr. Kennedy. But we got Lyndon Johnson, the Democrat won, and we got the Great Society, the biggest expansion of federal power and welfareism since the New Deal. Did huge damage to this country, still doing it today. The other guy, Barry Goldwater, he lost. He was a conservative, a constitutionalist, a patriot. And that man won, this country would be a lot stronger and richer and happier today. Now, the Kennedy assassination certainly didn't help, but another reason he lost, he was viciously vilified in the press of this country as a racist, a fascist, and an extremist. Any of those words familiar to some of you folk? Sort of heard him recently?
Yeah.
No accident at all. One of the main sources of the vilification of Barry Goldwater was Trans World Publications out of Chicago. David Cantor's little Soviet-subsidized, communist-run firm. So your Mr. Axelrod learned his trade at the hands of a Soviet-paid, professional black propagandist and character assassin. So it's little wonder that Mr. Axelrod is basically as dirty and as vicious as he is. Now there's another man. This is a guy who was voted in 100-0 through your US Senate to the most important military post in the country. Leon Panetta. Okay? Leon Panetta. That body, charged with guarding your country and defending your constitution, put a man in that position without doing any due diligence. Mr. Panetta's public record alone should have disqualified him. Leon Panetta was a left-wing congressman out of Santa Cruz, California. He had members of Democratic Socialists of America on his campaign committees. He put tributes in the Congressional Herald, a congressional record to communist peace activists like Lucy Hassler. He campaigned incessantly to get Star Wars abolished, to cut US military spending, to oppose Reagan's plans for opposing communism in Latin America. He was a hardcore, left-wing, anti-military Democrat. That's his public record.
Wow.
But back in Santa Cruz, there's a few things most people don't know about Mr. Panetta. Because in Santa Cruz, Leon and Sylvia Panetta were best friends with a couple called Hugh and Dorothy DeLacy. Now, Hugh DeLacy used to work with a Mr. Frank Marshall Davis in the American Committee for the Protection of Foreign-Born. Now, these two couples were great buddies. They had parties at each other's houses. They were friends for a long time. When Hugh DeLacy died in 1986, 4 people read eulogies to him at a memorial service at the Loudon Nelson Center in Santa Cruz. One of them was Leon Panetta. The other 3 were all members of Democratic Socialists of America. Now, Leon Panetta also shared a series of letters with Mr. DeLacy for 9 or 10 years, and I have them. And they're all about how terrible Reagan was for building up the military, how the military had to be cut, how Star Wars was a bad idea, and how Reagan was terrible for opposing the communists in Latin America, the Sandinistas. And Mr. Panetta should have known that his best friend Hugh DeLacy was going down to Nicaragua to visit with those communist Sandinistas, and was going to Spain to visit with the Spanish Communist Party. But Hugh DeLacy had a bit of a history as well. From 1946 to 1948, he was a Democrat congressman out of Seattle, Washington State. And that was the time they used to talk about the 47 states of the Union and the Soviet of Washington. The communists ran the state. And DeLacy spent most of his time in Congress agitating for your government to abandon Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist Chinese and support Mao Zedong's communist Chinese. And it's not surprising he did that, because all the time he was in Congress, and right up to at least the 1970s, he was a secret card-carrying member of the Communist Party USA. certainly not the first secret communist in Congress, and as Alan West correctly says, certainly not the last. So about 1975, just before the relationship with Panetta really got going, Hugh de Lacy was contacted by an old friend from the 1940s, a Stanford University academic named John Stuart Service. Now, these two men had worked together on Chinese issues when de Lacy was a congressman. John Stuart Service was a former KGB agent, a member of the Amerasia spy ring, the people who sold China to the communists. And in 1975, he arranged for Hugh and Dorothy de Lacy to get a free month-long trip to communist China on the dime of the Chinese Communist Party. And while they were there, they had time to visit with two American expatriates, and they corresponded with them later as well. One of them was Solomon Adler, the other was Frank Coe. Frank Coe was then working as a propagandist for the communist government. He was a former member of the Amerasia Soviet spy ring. The other man was Solomon Adler, another former member of the Amerasia Soviet spy ring, and at that time a serving advisor to the Chinese intelligence services, a live Chinese spy. Back in the United States, Hugh de Lacy was also in correspondence with Don Wheeler, a communist out of Washington State, a former member of the Silver Master KGB spy ring of Washington of the 1940s. Also corresponding with a man called Victor Perlow, a communist out of Connecticut, another former member of the Silver Master KGB spy ring. So Mr. de Lacy, who was best friends with Mr. Panetta for several years, personally knew 5 Soviet intelligence agents, one of whom was a live serving Chinese spy. Now just think about this, folks. Anybody here done a FBI security clearance? Had one done on them? Yep, several of you. Okay. Are they pretty extensive? They go through all your relatives, your friends, your schoolmates. They practically go through your underwear drawers, don't they? You think about this. If Mr. Panetta or Hugh de Lacy, or Mr. Obama for that matter, applied for a job as a janitor in your nearest military base and had to get an FBI security clearance, how do you think they'd get on?
No.
They wouldn't. Hugh de Lacy was also serving at the time as a West Coast advisor, was the West Coast agent for a little Marxist magazine out of Chicago called the Hyde Park, called In These Times. Now that was run by a man called James Weinstein, former Communist Party member, founder member of Democratic Socialists of America, reportedly peripherally involved in the Rosenberg spy ring of the 1940s, the people who gave Stalin the A-bomb secrets. In 2002, James Weinstein and a whole bunch of Chicago communists set up a big anti-Iraq war rally in downtown Chicago at Federal Plaza, and at that rally, an Illinois state politician made his name nationwide as an opponent of the Iraq war. Who do you think that might have been? Mr. Obama. Very incestuous this is. So that brings me to what I consider the real agenda of the left. And I've been sort of hinting at this, subtly. But I just want to say, I want to build up a little bit of credibility for a man, an Albuquerque high school math teacher named Mark Rudd. Now, who is Mark Rudd? Okay, Mark Rudd was the brains of the Weather Underground terrorist organisation. He was right up there in the top leadership with Obama's best friends, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn. In 1968, he led the famous SDS riots at Columbia University, which shut down the university for weeks. In 1969, he was in Cuba training under a KGB major. In 2006, Mark Rudd and Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn and Jeff Jones, another Weather Underground leader who incidentally helped to write Obama's stimulus package, got together with Tom Hayden and Angela Davis and David Graeber, one of the key founders of the Occupy movement, and a whole bunch of communists and socialists to set up a new organisation called Movement for a Democratic Society, the adult support network for the new SDS radicals, which are now active on campuses all over your country. In 2008, Movement for a Democratic Society spawned an offshoot organisation, and they called that one Progressives for Obama. So Mark Rudd endorsed Progressives for Obama. So Mark Rudd is a key member of the US left, and he knows people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn who have worked with Obama for many, many years. So when he predicts Obama's agenda and says where he wants to take this country, I believe him. So in November 2008, just after the election, President-elect Obama appointed some conservatives to positions in this country's defence establishment. And some poor naive souls on our side of the fence breathed a big sigh of relief. You know, oh, maybe he's a moderate. Maybe he's going to be okay. We don't have to worry about all this radical stuff. But the left were absolutely spewing. They were not happy. And Mark Rudd's inbox was filling up with emails from irate comrades from all over the country. What the hell is our boy doing putting conservatives into the military-industrial complex? This is not what we work for. And Mark Rudd knew he had a problem. So to settle the comrades down, to get them back on board with the agenda, back behind the president, he wrote a little article for a Marxist blog out of Austin, Texas called the Rag Blog, very widely read on the left. And this is what he wrote to settle the troops down. November 28, 2008, it's called Let's Get Smart About Obama, still online. He started out by saying, Obama is a very strategic thinker. He knew precisely what it would take to get elected, and he didn't blow it. He knew he had to play to the centre, to not be run over by the press, or to the Republicans, or to scare centrist voters. He made it. So he has a narrow mandate for change. The economic agenda will stress stimulus from the bottom at times and handouts to the top at others. Is that what's happened? Pretty much. Went on to say, but never, never threaten the military budget, because that will unite a huge majority of Congress against him. Leave the military alone, because they're way too powerful for now. By the second or third year of this recession, people may begin to discuss cutting the military budget. So where are we now, folks?
Yeah.
3 years in, right? More, 4 years in. You're worried about your jobs, your businesses, keeping your kids in college. America's focused on the economic issues. And while you're doing that, Mr. Obama and smiling Leon Panetta are cutting your military to ribbons. Whole divisions going from the army. Fleet, weapon systems, ships, the Navy's being cut to ribbons. Mr. Obama has even talked about cutting, he's commissioned a paper to this effect, cutting your US nuclear arsenal down to 292 nukes.
Yeah.
You used to have 6,000.
Yeah.
Russia has got more than 1,500 that we know about. And what was Mr. Obama doing in Moscow, in Korea a few months ago, talking to Dmitry Medvedev, the Russian president, off mic? No one was listening, he thought, about missile defense. That's what he was talking about. I need some space. When I get re-elected, I will have more flexibility to deal with you. Medvedev says, yes, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you.
Yep.
That is the single most significant thing your president has said in his entire term of office, because that is the agenda of the left. That is where they want to take your country. This is not about a depression. You guys can survive a depression. This is not about losing some of your rights, because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before when your president and your Secretary of Defense are basically giving your number one enemy everything it wants.
Yeah.
And you can't, Mitt Romney correctly, to his credit, after Obama said that, came out and said, Russia is this country's #1 geopolitical foe.
Yeah.
And he was 100% right.